sometimes I provide people a masking guide and I show them where to apply the masking. I say, do this before class because it's going to be time intensive and take some time, so do it before class. But for this workshop, I'm going to do it in class. I haven't applied any masking to anything. We're going to do it together. And think about where the sun is, and if there's going to be a bunch of trees here, right? The trees would be radiating these shadows out from, you know, from wherever they're rooted. Let's say there's a tree here, it'd be radiating out here. Now you can see the soft edge I'm getting, right? And when it hits a snowbank, it's going to go over the snowbank, and you want to follow the contour of the snowbank. So you see what I did there? How it's moving, radiating out from the trunk in that direction. And I'm just going to quickly I'll start this direction. If the sun's hitting trees here, the trunks would be radiating the shadows on this. And of course, the trunks, the trees have limbs, and and so it's just not just one straight line. They've got limbs and foliage on them that would also have shadows. And I want to keep this nice and soft and notice how it gets more diffused as it moves down here because the paper's wetter. Gravity moved the water down here. Now, if you're getting too many, look at, I'm getting these hard edges already, right? If you don't like those hard edges, I've got two brushes. I got a second brush. I can take my second brush, which is a thirsty brush, and it's easy for me to just soften those. Or if I think they're too dark, I can just hit them with the tissue. All right, let's keep things soft and light at this point. We can darken up things later, okay? We're going to start loose, out of control, and as the painting progresses, we're going to get it tighter and tighter and tighter and bring things into focus. Actually, what I'm going to do, in fact, is let's just tone this whole bottom part here. I know you're like, whoa, what's he doing? That's going to help bring the eye up here. If we keep this darker down here, it'll help bring the eye up in this direction. So we're starting loose. We're toning this bottom section. I'm going to get it really dark down here, or darker, more pigment. Starting loose, wet, and we're going to get tighter and tighter and tighter as the painting progresses. All right. Okay. So back to those shadows, those cast shadows. I just want to get a ton of light value cast shadows running across. They're overlapping. They're radiating out from that point. I'm starting loose, just giving the impression of these shadows. And you can take your other brush and you can soften, you can pull the color across. This is going to be dark later, so we don't worry about what's going on in the creek. That's going to get darkened up later. The paper's expanding, so it's buckling a little bit, and now, so I'm just repositioning the paper. All right, let's get some dark shadow coming here. And how about right here? Following the contour of that snow, that snowbank, right?
We have a question from Candy. Is that all cobalt, or have you mixed it with something?
This is all cobalt blue. I mean, my palette's dirty. It's pretty dirty, so it's probably got some other stuff in there, but it's mostly cobalt blue, yes.
Thank you. And we have a question. The paper looks very yellow, but that is because of the lighting and how the camera interprets that, correct? It's not because of...
Yeah, it's bright white Fabriano Artistico, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, maybe there's some different settings in the lights with different colors of the light, but I don't want to mess with that right now. Just want to keep this party going. All right, now we've got suggestions of shadows coming across, overlapping, radiating out from this point. I know it's looks like a mess, Everything starts loose and we will tighten it up as we progress.
I hope you're enjoying this lesson. I'd like to take this opportunity to invite everyone who wants to improve their painting skills to my free masterclass, where I'll share even more watercolor painting hacks. Click the link in the video description to register for free. See you there soon.
We're going to put darker shadows over this later, so don't worry. This is just the first layer of some light shadows coming across, and it gets more and more diffuse as it goes closer to us. Okay, so now we've got the suggestion of some shadows. All right, now we're going to be brave. We're going to get wild and crazy. I'm getting a big brush. I'm going to put in some Quin gold up here where I want those trees. I think before I start, I'll actually hit these shadows here with a tissue just to dry it up a bit. I don't actually want that Quin gold and the color of my trees to be flowing down into the shadows, but if some of that happens, that's all right. I'm going onto the palette and I'm getting a bunch of Quin gold, consistency of milk. So a stronger consistency paint. And think about where you want your tree line. Okay, so I'm going to put my trees right here. And underneath that, so I think I'll go ahead and spatter some water. I'm taking this spray bottle and I'm going to spatter droplets. I'm not misting it. It's little droplets of water up here to loosen it up. You can see what happened when it hit the water. When it hit the paint, it just made it more organic. And then around that, let's do that cobalt blue. My board is flat. It was tilted, now it's flat. It's a milky cobalt blue underneath it. There we go. And then let's take that color and let's start suggesting some distant trunks of trees, different depths away. So I'm just pulling the color down. And these will suggest some tree trunks off in the distance. Some are closer, some are farther, maybe some are a little bigger, some are smaller. Again, I pull it to the right to make it a little wider if I want. And we're going to break this up, don't worry. And we'll do the same thing up top here. We can pull up some, we'll start pulling up some trunks up there too. Let's throw this back on. I'm going to spatter some more water, let things integrate. I'm going to tilt the board, let it run a little bit. I can see it dripping across the paper. I'll add some more water and you'll see how wet it is. All right, see how wet that is? I love to watch the colors integrating on the paper. See it running back and forth, and already we have this glow already beginning. Then I'm going to take my Perla brush, my pointy brush, and I'm going to pull up some trunks. And we can pull some more trunks later as well. Now think of variety of sizes, some taller, some shorter, all right? And now here's that sponge I was talking about. So here is the sponge. I cut off a triangle of that sponge, a cellulose sponge. I'll zoom in on it so you can see how porous it is. All right, so you can see how porous the sponge is. It's really old. I tore off a bit of it, and then I cut off a bit and I cut it into a point. I cut that into a point, and you can see the holes in it. It's porous. Let me zoom back out. I'm going to take that sponge and I'm going to get it soaking wet in my tub of water. So it's dripping wet. And I'm going to grab some of that Quin gold, milky consistency Quin gold, and fill it with Quin gold. And I'm going to use it to stamp suggestions of pine trees on the paper. I'm going to get a little stronger. And just so it doesn't look, I want it to look a little more irregular. Now, not all of these trees need to be pine trees. Some can be deciduous trees versus the coniferous trees. We're learning about our trees in this class. Go. All right, now already that action line looks more irregular, it looks more organic, right? So look at how quickly we put those trees in and how already we got a glow within just a matter of seconds. And then we look at how wet it is. You see how the paint is moving? I really work wet. It's the biggest comment I get when I teach workshops is, boy, do you work wet. And then I'm going to take my pointy brush, and in these deciduous trees, I'll make some limbs on a couple of these. So we've got a variety of different trees. Connect, let them link and connect together. And then let's go ahead and let's start getting crazy with getting this darker. This is, we want this to be very moody. Actually, before we do that, let's radiate some shadows out while this is still wet. We'll drag the paint out. So where was our X? Our X is right there. The sun's right there. It's radiating through the trees. It catches a trunk, and then it pulls the trunk, the shadows across. And then some of these lines can suggest limbs, and then some of these lines can suggest shadows coming out from the trees. Now I know these shadows will be a little greenish. That's fine. It'll kind of link this part of the painting to the rest of the painting. Let the colors flow together. It's beautiful. And so look at these beautiful shadows. And again, some of these lines might suggest some limbs. Some of them might suggest the cast shadows. And where's the sun? Radiates out from the sun. And if you don't like the color, just hit it with the tissue. But it kind of gives a glow to the shadow, which is really nice, isn't it? Yes, David, it's awesome. We love it. So all the shadows, they don't have to be just blue. And then there's some limbs coming out from some of these trunks. And then there's cast shadows. I'm just zigzagging the lines through there. And look at that beautiful sparkle of white along the base of the trees, right? And you can still see how super wet it is. And look at how the trees link to some of those shadows. I love it. And it all happened within just seconds. And if you don't like the color, if it's too much for you, just hit it with the tissue. But I love it. And now I'm going to get it darker. I'm going to take some phthalo blue and some indigo. I got some dioxazine purple too. That would be a pretty color. And you might want to get a shield when you're doing this. So I got an old scrap of paper, and I can protect things with the scrap of paper. And I can spatter on some darks into there while it's wet and let those darks melt in to what I've already done. Let's redarken the shore in a few areas, or in this area.
I just wanted to let you know, David, that we have soon spent 2 hours together and we have some more things to get through and the Q&A part. So is it possible to either wrap up now or take a break and finish during the Q&A part.
Yeah, I can wrap this up right now, no problem. I'm pretty much done with the painting. I think these darks right here, right along the shore, really help make that pop. And maybe just pull that dark up in here. We could also, a couple places, incorporate the dark in a few places, just like I did on the shore there. Lift a little bit of some paint to maybe suggest a little reflection of this rock. There's not a lot of paint to lift there. There we go. Look at that. And some more horizontal lines. Break that up. Yeah, nice. Gosh, I'm loving this. I hope everybody else is enjoying this. Man, I could paint these all day. If you want to, I didn't do it with the one that you see on the right, but you can put in some little saplings and trees and things coming through the bank. And again, I show you how to use a palette knife in the workshop, but you can just use a brush too. All kinds of fun. You can, yeah, I think, what do you guys think? I feel like putting a mat around it. Maybe while you guys are talking, I can find a mat and show everybody what it looks like when it's all cleaned up with the mat. Does that sound good?
What is the palette that you're using? We had a couple of comments that looked like a very nice palette.
Yeah. The palette is a John Pike palette, but I modified it. I took some caulking fluid, some silicone caulking, and I caulked out some mixing areas, and that's why it's so nice and clean. I know it doesn't look really clean, but at least my yellow's not mixing into my my indigo and things like that. Yeah.
Okay, so it's hand adjusted to be exactly what you need. That's wonderful. Let me check. We had several questions regarding the largest brush. What was that?
Oh, the largest brush. Well, here was my largest brushes. I got a flat brush that was like a 1.5 inch flat brush. It's just from our friends at Cheap Joe's, but I've used a Robert Simmons 1-inch brush in my plein air kit. Any big brush. This is a Prado brush. It's a size 16 Escoda Prado. I sawed the handle off because it was a long handled brush, so I sawed it off. But the brush I used most of the time was I used these two brushes. They're both Perlas. One's an older brush. I use it for integrating colors, and one's it's actually like a year old, but it's a newer brush. So I try to keep the point on it nice. So those are the brushes I use.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, like brush. And cauliflowers, we've spoken about that. And we had a question regarding the board, if it was lying flat or standing up, and maybe someone didn't really see that you use this kind of board that you can tilt any way you like.
Yeah. So I've got an easel. It's a camera easel, and the camera easel is on a ball joint. There's a ball joint, so it can pivot in any direction. And so that's true. In the workshop, I'm constantly talking about, now I've got it flat. Now I've got it at a 5-degree angle or 10-degree angle, or I have it diagonal. But I know I was moving at a pretty fast pace. So yeah, I was constantly moving in different directions to let colors mix and merge on the paper. But this is called a Gorilla Flex easel, the silver part. And this is a camera tripod, any camera tripod with a ball joint. It happens to be called a Manfrotto tripod, but you can get any brand you want.
Wonderful. And for those who don't want to go purchase something, I guess we could also just use our hands.
Yeah.
Just
Typically,
hold.
because I can't put a full sheet on that, right? So typically, if I'm working really big, I just prop things up on a tissue box, or I prop it up like this, and I just put the board on that and work at an angle with it. with tissue boxes and rolls of tape, things
Yeah.
like that.
And as long as it's possible to remove, we can always just use our hands.
Exactly. Yeah, just use your hands. Yeah, yeah. But if I need my hands, I'll just prop it on something and then I have my hands
Yeah.
free, and then I'll pick it up and I'll move it.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. Perfect. Wonderful. That makes you feel like something we can try on our own without having to go and purchase a camera. Yeah. Yeah. And then we had a question about the quinacridone gold. Not everyone will have that. What are your suggestions for someone who don't have the quinacridone gold?
Yeah, the Quin Gold is not being made apparently from a lot of companies. So I've been playing around with some different colors. I'm an ambassador or endorsed by Core Paint right now. And so I'm playing with a couple different colors that they use to make a nice Quin Gold, a color that looks very similar to Quin Gold. I don't remember I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head though. If you want, I can go into my storage and look for it. But if there's a certain yellow I can mix with a certain red and kind of get it very similar. So it's not an issue, but I still have a bunch of tubes of Quin Gold, so I've been using that. But there are other colors that you can mix that are very similar.
We can mix yellow with some maybe burnt sienna or some reddish and get a similar result.
Exactly, yeah. So I just found another yellow and a reddish color and mixed them together and found a color that's very similar. Yeah.
Perfect, perfect, wonderful. And then we had a question from Janice, which I'm gonna tie to another question that we got from another person. So her question is, do you use non-staining colors so that you can more easily lift? And the other question was, it seems like arches or arche is harder to lift from in comparison to Fabriano. What are your thoughts on the choice of paper and paint to be able to lift in the way that you do?
Yeah, good question. So as I mentioned when I was painting, the Fabriano Artistico is very sensitive. So it's very easy to lift paint off of that paper. And that's why artists like Chen Chi, who make these amazing koi, they lift out these koi shapes or florals, and they use that paper. Arches you can lift off of, but it's harder to lift off of. But the nice thing about arches is you can layer paint, you can dry it, put another layer on top, dry it without disturbing the previous layer. You know,
it's the pro and con. Like, what is your number one priority? You can't really get both.
Yeah. So if you want to be able to lift really easy, then Fabriano Artistico might be a nice paper for you. But if you want to layer one glaze of color on top of another without disturbing the previous layer, then a paper that doesn't lift as easy, like arches, might be a paper you might like. As far as staining versus non-staining, yeah, I used a lot of staining colors like phthalo blue and indigo. Even my Quin Gold will stain. And I don't worry about it because as long as I can get it lighter in value, it'll still read how I need it to read. And I can get it pretty darn close to the white of the paper, even my staining colors. But sometimes in order to do that, I have to, bring out a big stiff brush like a Fritz scrubber or a oil painting brush. But yeah, it hasn't been a concern. I'll use staining, non-staining. I don't worry about that at all.
Thank you for that clarification. Then we had questions regarding the rough versus cold press. Do you always use rough paper for these kinds of landscapes to get the effects that you're looking for? And what is the difference between Fabriano Artistico cold pressed and rough?
Yeah, so for those who are kind of new to watercolor and are not familiar with all these different textures and different weights of paper, a rough paper is just that. It's just it's a rougher surface, so it has like little hills and valleys to the paper, and so it's easier to get a dry brush effect, a broken edge effect. So I demonstrate that during the workshop that you can get if you're interested, where I take a stiff bristle brush like the Perla, and I get it thirsty, so it's not dripping with paint. It's a thirsty brush with some paint, and I use the side of the brush and I skim over the paper. And where it hits the hills, it leaves some paint, and it doesn't leave paint in the valleys of the textured paper, and I get a broken edge. And so as far as how often I use rough versus cold press, so cold press, for those who are new, Cold press is a little smoother, and you can also even get hot press, which is really smooth, right? So there's soft press. There's a variety of different types of papers, and there's different weights. So how often I use cold press versus rough? I use rough about 95% of the time. So because it gives me the option of getting the dry brush effects easier. If I'm going to do something where I wanted more detail, maybe I was going to do a portrait of somebody, which I teach everything. I teach a lot of different subjects. So if I'm going to do a portrait of somebody, then I'll use cold press because I want more detailed. I want softer, more when the colors integrate. I don't want to have the hills and valleys where maybe a granulating color might go into the valley and give me some texture I'm not interested in. So anyways, a smoother paper like a cold press, I might use that for like a portrait or more detailed picture.
Thank you for that. We have another question regarding paper. If it dries too fast, can I re-wet the paper, the back of the paper again?
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes when I paint, I start off on dry paper and I put my light values in, and then I dry it, and then I wet the back and I continue. So the first step is usually pretty easy. It's kind of toning the paper. So sometimes I'll just work on dry paper, tone the paper, then I'll dry it, lock that in place, kind of an underpainting, the mother color of all the shapes. And then I dry it, and then I'll wet the back, and then I'll move into my mid values. And why do I wet the back for my mid values? Because when I do the mid values, it takes a lot more time. So I need more time. So wetting the back will provide me more time. That when I put a bead of color on the surface, it stays wet longer. So I wet the back when I want more time to push the color around, to manipulate the bead, to pull it, to integrate shapes based on the values. And again, like you said, and even during midway, I've never done it, but you could just lift up the paper and mist the back or spray the back. Some people put a wet cloth underneath their paper to kind of keep the surface wet longer. So I've heard of different techniques of keeping the surface wet longer to provide more time to push the pigment around.